Right, I have to turn on the tape recorder. For those of you who just joined us by a recording, we did just pray, so we didn't forget that, right? But we just got the tape recorder on. All right, we're here to kind of think about the work that Melody has been doing. Just been doing a great work, I think, from my perspective. We'll spend some time as she gives us a PowerPoint presentation. I think you're going to share that, Mary, or Melody. That'd probably be better if you're able to share that, Mary. So maybe you need to share your screen while I'm talking here. And there we go. After we get the PowerPoint finished, we will then spend some time in discussion, kind of just think about topics, questions, anything that we'd like to discuss. Then after that phase, we'll move into an evaluation phase where the three of us that are on Melody's oral review committee, which would be myself, Dr. Glenn, and Dr. Kit, we would then spend some time, about 10 minutes. We just have to fill out a form together online. And then we'll bring everybody else back in the session, and we'll celebrate, all right? Because I know that will be the case. All right. So Melody, go ahead. Go ahead and lead us in your presentation.
All right, thank you. Well, the title of this is How a Holistic, Christ-Centered, Trauma-Informed Academic Setting Facilitates Transformation in the Lives of Latino Youth in the San Fernando Valley.
Do one more thing. One more thing.
Yeah.
Turn off your video, and we'll just look at the PowerPoint. That might save you a little bandwidth, even on the audio side. So if you click on that stop video down there at the bottom of the screen, you see that down there. It should be in the bottom left.
Let's see. Not video. Okay.
Yeah, hit that.
All right.
So yeah, we'll see if that even helps your audio a little bit. All right.
Okay, good. It seems like it's helping my reception of your audio, so that's positive.
Yeah.
But I feel like I could receive a doctorate practically for the title of this. It's so long.
Right.
But I wanted it to be very specific. So Mary, we can go to the first presentation slide. So there's 13 little faces shining at us in this picture. And this is the demographic makeup of the public schools in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, which is the context for this project. Most of the schools have 90% or more Latinos, and most of those schools are not faring very well. And the problem that we're really trying to solve with this project is Latinos are the fastest growing segment of the United States, to lag behind everyone else in academic performance. And there's been improvements made, but we know that long-term poverty is directly correlated to educational attainment. So we're talking about how far children go in education and also the quality of the education and the proficiency. So up until 2015 in California, in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, only 4 of these 13 children would have been expected to graduate from high school. And that really isn't acceptable. And in 2015, California changed its laws. And now as many as 11 of these students will graduate because of these changes. But the truth is that only 1 or maybe 2 of them will attain even 9th grade proficiency level in math or English. And these things are going to lead to problems in their lives down the road. So there are some systems issues with education, but there's also just an untenable situation for children like these in this picture. About 6 of these children are predicted to enter college, but probably only 2 or 3 will have the skills and the perseverance to be able to actually earn a degree. So what are the issues that contribute to these inequities in education? Well, a lot of it has to do with acculturation and assimilation stress, especially for newer immigrants. And in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, there's still a lot of new immigrants. And even if these children were born here, they have to straddle the culture of home and school, which are very different. And so language acquisition is often an issue, or parents not understanding the values and requirements of the school, or the school not understanding the values of the family. And the poverty issues, living in violence and having issues of trauma in their background. One study that I encountered looked at an impoverished neighborhood school and found that 100% of the children had been exposed to violence. There's also just a disconnect between the American educational system and Latino cultural values. So we know that Latinos are very group-oriented, very community-oriented, and they do things together. And the American school system is really based on competition and individualism. The family values that require or expect children to take care of other siblings, to stay out of school if there's not childcare, to go to Mexico or Guatemala for big family events, or if someone is sick, to be at the hospital. And when children get old enough to drop out of school and work, these are all expectations that are in the Latino family that the American education system hasn't really addressed, or they're not able to bridge that gap. So one of the things that I found in the interviews and the surveys with our students from Cloud and Fire, and also from the Latino professionals, all of these things were real big factors. Okay, Mary, we can go to the next slide. I mean, Dr. Glenn, we can go to the next slide. So the students, the Cloud and Fire students that were interviewed and surveyed, they provided these words to explain and express how their public school experiences were. And I think that these words are just heart-wrenching, really, when you think of what school children might experience in school. And all of these words, none are left out. None of the words they used are left out. They're all unanimously and overwhelmingly negative. And they express that school is not a place they want to be. There's no motivation to be there. There's fear, in fact, to be at school. And it's not a place where they feel as though anyone cares about them. It's a place of danger. And to imagine being in that kind of environment from kindergarten up until 12th grade, we could see why there would be dropout rates among Latinos. So we'll go to the next slide. Those same students provided these words to talk about their experience of Cloud and Fire. And it's very emotional for me personally, because we set out to create an environment that was welcoming, that expressed the love of Christ. And these are not words that we prompted them to say. This is what their experience in our environment gave to them. And it's such a contrast from the negative words that they used for public school. We started the school as an outreach into the community to fill a need. It's not that we wanted to start a school. We wanted to bring Christ nearer. We wanted to show the students that there was another way. We wanted to provide them with a second chance. And you can see from these words that it really did work. And not all of our students graduated. We had a good graduation rate, but what we really succeeded at was creating something that could redeem their school experience. And in many ways, they felt like it redeemed their lives. Let's see. 96% of the students that were interviewed said that the experience of Cloud and Fire was extremely life-changing for them. And you see that word life-changing, or that term life-changing. And I want to point out that in both of these word clouds, the size of the word is correlated to how many times different students use that. So the bigger the word, the more times people expressed it. And I just think it's phenomenal to think that for 9 years we were able to work with 1,000 students and create this type of environment for them. We can go to the next slide, Mary. Okay. So one of the things that we found that was so interesting in the research was that part of the value was that the program was holistic. So we asked them what was the most life-changing part of the program. And the students, so the students' responses are on the left there in the top. So about 77% of them said that the academic part and what we called the other. So that was the faith-based part, the emotional healing part, the community, the service projects, the camping, the college and career class. There were about 20 different things that we did. The mentoring, all of those things were equally important to the students as the academic program was. What's really interesting, the staff responses, and this includes faculty, credentialed teachers whose sole purpose there was to educate children. The faculty and staff said that the non-academic part, the other part, was the most important and life-changing part. And none of the faculty, Mary, go up, no, go up to the red and yellow. You'll see that no one, just stay right there. Yeah, the blue would represent the academic program as being the most life-changing. In other words, we changed lives because they earned a diploma or they learned to finally do math at a high school level. None of the faculty or staff said that. It was all about the other part of the program. We felt that that was life-changing. Okay, now in the green circles down below, the student and staff responses to the number one reason that the program changed lives, 65% of the students and 77.8% of the staff said it was the combination, it was the holistic approach. It wasn't just that it was, you know, a good teaching environment. It was all the other stuff that we did is what made the program life-changing for the students. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So in the research with the students and the staff, and actually the interviews with the Latino professionals also validated this. There were 4 themes that emerged as being the most important in the holistic design. And I think this is really important. The foundation was cultural competence. The students felt that we understood their Latino culture and that we respected it and that we honored it. And I have personally been told by students, you're not white, you're Latina. And I consider that a very high compliment that they would consider me to be one of them because they felt understood and honored in their culture. So cultural competence has to be the foundation. But the 4 things that emerged was a positive atmosphere, a positive environment that was not based in shame, it was not based in scolding, it was not based in anger, it was based in respect and honor. And then there was trauma care. Students said, this is the place where I was healed from the things that happened to me. So many of our students would say, I never told anyone this before. They would share their secrets. They would share their heartaches. They would share their victimization with us. And we were able to work with them. We always had a therapist on staff and or a social worker. We had a chaplain on staff and we had senior staff who were very good at crisis intervention. And we had protocols for what to do and how to identify when behavior was defiance or belligerence, or when it was related to trauma emerging from the past and PTSD. So we had a really good trauma care program in place. The community and the cohesive environment, that was very important, and that makes sense with Latino culture because they're so collectivistic in their cultural values. So the community and the different things that we did to establish and maintain community and friendships and a sense of us, that was very important. And if you recall those words from the public school, those words were isolating words, not inclusion words, not I belong here, but I don't belong here. And at Cloud and Fire, everyone belonged. And we called students by name on a daily basis. And many times they received a hug at the door, and they received birthday cards and birthday recognition, and check-ins on how their family was doing if there were issues going on. And then the last thing that emerged as being crucially important was spiritual care, that spiritual formation piece that we had. And because we were a charter school, we were not a religious school, but the charter school company that we worked with allowed us to have what we called a morning huddle 30 minutes before school officially started. And so our students came to that, and it was often just a very inspiring, motivational word. And sometimes it would actually be a Bible lesson. We also had pull-out sessions for prayer times, and that was all very important. It came out in many, many of the interviews and surveys. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what are some of the ways that we dealt with cultural competency? And some of the research that I cited in my dissertation is also research that impacted us at Cloud and Fire. And I don't know if people in this room are familiar with these models I'm going to be talking about, but the Lewis model of cultural classifications is used extensively for global businesses. But to my knowledge, it is not used in the academic setting. And this visual model is so helpful. Lewis divided all cultures into linear active, multi-active, and reactive. And the linear active is at the lower left in the dark blue, and the multi-active is at the top. And the United States culture is linear active, meaning sequential, chronological, systematic, one thing done at a time, task-oriented, and multi-active, we don't do things sequentially. We do them all at once. It's sort of a jumble. People talk at the same time. There's a lot of looseness in the way things are approached. We could go into that in depth, but I think for time's sake, the important thing to notice is that the Hispanic American cultures, the Latino cultures, are basically as far away from the values of the United States as is possible on this scale. And of course, this is just one scale that describes cultural personalities. But if we dig down into the Lewis model, we see a lot of disconnect between these cultures and a lot of room for learning about how to bridge the gaps that are just naturally and invisibly there without us ever identifying them. So the Lewis model was really important, and the writings of Richard Lewis are crucial to understanding intercultural relationships. Okay, the next slide, it talks about, and I'm not breaking down the model here for time's sake, but Geert Hofstede, who is a Dutch cultural social scientist, he has come up with 6 different cultural dimensions. And his model goes from 0 to 100, and he's basically gathered data from, many cultures, almost every culture in the world, it seems like, except for maybe some of these microcultures, and given them scores from 0 to 100 on 6 different dimensions. I only have 5 shown here because the 6th one, there's not much difference. This graph is an amalgamation of the scores that are most common in the Northeast San Fernando Valley of Mexican, Salvadorian, Guatemalan, and Honduran. That would kind of be like an approximation of Latino culture in the United States. So that's the red line. And then we compare it to the blue line, which is the dominant culture in the United States. And we see that there's just huge differences in values and the way cultures interact. So power distance is whether or not you believe that some people should, sorry, I'm having some interruptions on my computer. Just a moment. My goodness. Okay. Power distance is whether or not you believe people in culture have sort of a position that they take, or whether you believe that, you know, it's liberty and justice for all. And in Latino cultures, there's much more of an acceptance that some people are maybe more powerful and some are less powerful. The individualism score and collectivism, United States is one of the most individualist countries in the entire world, and Latino cultures are some of the most collectivist. So this graph shows that difference. Masculinity and femininity is whether or not different genders are assigned different roles. And we can see that there's a little bit of difference there. If you break down the individual cultures, you see more difference. The uncertainty avoidance is how well people can deal with a lack of control. And the United States culture, we want control. And in other cultures, you know, sometimes you can't fix things as easily, or you don't feel that you can. And so you just give in to whatever is going on around you. And you can see those mindset differences. And indulgence is related to delayed gratification. And the United States has a little bit more of the value of delayed gratification. So the point of this is that we can just see there's huge cultural differences, and we have to take those into account. So next slide. We're just gonna remind ourselves about these 4 pillars, and the intervention that was created from the research that emerged was to create a training for teachers. And it could be for pastors or youth workers or anyone who works interculturally with Latinos. But I took this training to a group of teachers that were seasoned veteran teachers in the same charter school company as Cloud and Fire. So these were teachers working with this same population, a high school dropout or kicked out population, 16 to 25, primarily Latino. Some of these teachers had 20 plus years of experience. And I thought it would be interesting to see if this information was relevant to them and their work, if it was new information to them. So we talked about the positive environment. We talked about the trauma care. One thing that I would like to say about the trauma care is that generally a trauma score of 4 or more is of extreme concern. And 50% of our students had more than 10 trauma events in their childhood. And it was not uncommon to find scores of 15 and 17. And that would be the same for the student population of these other schools. And some of those teachers actually had been informed in trauma care, but they were surprised to see the findings of the prevalence of trauma backgrounds in our students. One of the very interesting studies that I found in relation to trauma care was an examination of Vietnam vets Afghanistan vets. And children who are growing up in violent communities, in poor, violent communities. And all of the factors are identical. All of the conditions that lead to trauma were identical. All of the responses were identical. But what we found is that in war veterans, they received a diagnosis and they received care. With children, they receive these kind of blaming labels, defiance disorder, or maybe ADHD. And rather than getting care for PTSD or broken hearts or, ongoing situations of trauma, they were relegated to the dean's office or detention or special schools for behavioral issues, those kinds of things. So we talked about trauma care with these teachers and the development of the us and the community. And at the director's request, I was only able to touch briefly on spiritual care and the impact of faith in the life of the Latino. So there were many things that I read. Theologian Alberto Garcia was one who said you cannot separate the secular and the sacred for the Latino. They are integrated. And even medical studies that brought in faith into patient care for Latinos because it's such a vital part of the culture. So we talked about all of these things. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see some of the responses. So these are the issues that we talked about down below the graph. We talked about the multi-active cultures. That's the Lewis scale. We talked about collectivism specifically and how that relates to us in the classroom. We talked about the Hofstede 6 cultural dimensions. We talked about Latino youth and trauma. We talked about Latinos and faith, shame and honor cultures. I didn't talk much about that here in this presentation, but that is a huge factor in Latino culture. The value of revenge, the issues that are related to shame. And then we talked about the holistic academic approach. And so the post-training survey from the teachers showed that they all thought it was important, even the things that we barely touched on, such as the religion and the shame honor, they felt were important. No one said this was not useful information to them. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so if we look at these two, these are the before and after evaluations. So we see that before the workshop, they basically, the majority of people felt like they didn't have a lot of information about these issues. And that's really interesting to me because they work with Latinos and many of them have worked with Latinos for years. But for the most of them, this was new information. And then you can see in the graph below that after the workshop, they felt like they had much more information about it. So that was a good sign. So the future applications for this work, I think for me personally, would be to support existing teams in their work with Latinos and see if we can help propel education forward and help our Latino youth do better in school. And I think if we had better understanding interculturally, we could get somewhere that would be more successful. I'm personally very concerned about these changes in our California educational system that really lower the bar for Latinos and for other ethnic groups and say, you know, it's okay, we're just going to lower the requirements for graduation so that we don't have such bad graduation rates in California. So I think that there is potential to advocate for educational reform and policy change. And I would love to be able to assist faith-based organizations with charter startups or other ways to interact with Latino students, because I believe that all of the research from this project showed that what we did really worked. It made a difference in lives, and I'd like to see that replicated elsewhere. And then as I've been thinking about the world and what's going on in the world today, I think there are correlations to other cultures, to refugee cultures, to all newcomers into our country, that we need to be able to adapt our education system and adapt our own values in ways that are inclusive and create better community at schools, and to learn how to deal with trauma care for all cultures, particularly just even people who immigrate under even joyous circumstances. Those are traumatic events. Those are difficult experiences, especially for children. I would like to see curriculum developed that will help teach some of this. And if we go to the next slide, I will try to talk without crying, but I don't think I can. This project, in many ways and unexpectedly, was sort of a post-mortem of our 9-year academy that we ran. And when I started this doctoral work, I really felt that it was to enhance and to propel forward what we were doing. When I started this work in 2015, we were at the height of our school. We were having class size of about 150 students. And I thought we would continue to grow, but that was the same year that the laws changed and it reduced the dropout. And also we've had issues with immigration since 2016 that have caused some of our immigrant students to sort of lay low a little bit more. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity to delve into the research and to talk to students and to talk to staff and to really get the feedback and the data that says what we did worked. We did what we set out to do. We blessed students and we gave them a hope and a future. And you see some of our staff and some of our students are wearing these shirts, dream big, work hard. That was our motto. And it was a big dream. We worked hard. And I believe that the Lord used us in many ways. And I just want to read the quote from Dallas Willard. And I feel that it was really his writing, you know, the theological framework from Divine Conspiracy, which talks, you know, of a backwards way, backwards to many of us. We're used to, we evangelize and then we disciple. That's how we do things in the church. And he talks about discipleship evangelism, where you're really discipling people and then they come to the Lord. And that's what we did at Cloud on Fire Academy. He says, you lead people to become disciples of Jesus by ravishing them with a vision of life in the kingdom of the heavens, in the fellowship of Jesus. And you do this by proclaiming, manifesting, and teaching the kingdom to them in the manner learned from Jesus himself. You thereby change the belief system that governs their lives. And, you know, we had kids say to me in interviews, this is where I found spiritual healing. This is where I found God. This is where I understood faith. This is where I found hope. And all I can say is the Lord allowed us 9 really magical years to do something that was special. And I'm not exactly sure at this moment where the next thing is, because we've closed the school, but I know God enough to know that he will build on this somehow. And I'm I'm ready to do that when he reveals the path for that. So I'd just like to close with this quote from Amy Carmichael, who's, of course, a missionary to India. "We will have all of eternity to celebrate the victories, but only a few short hours before sunset to win them." And that's what I have for you. And sorry I cried. I tried not to.
Amen. Thanks, Melody. Yeah, it's what a great work. Thank you so much for sharing, and through the tears and the joys. Yeah, I know. Well, we need to kind of spend a little time in some thinking and discussion on what we've heard. Like you just kind of think about questions, topics that you'd like to discuss. Some of you who work closely with her at this time, with Melody, I'd ask you to kind of take the lead, and I'll do some listening, and I'll kind of put in my questions along the way. So I'm going to be quiet and let some of you kind of lead out.
Before, I just wanted to kind of put out a couple of comments, and I'll ask questions later, but okay. I had 3 comments or observations that I had about this project, which I thought were significant. The first one is Melody's approach. This holistic approach is so unique because in our communities, everything is so siloed. And I felt that through her research and also through her ability to see in communities, to understand how this integrated approach was so important, moving towards holistic healing for the educational system in particular. So I just thought that integration was so beautifully woven. That's very countercultural to the way that our systems work. The second thing that I feel kind of on this theme of integration, Melody has these beautiful gifts of pastoral leadership and education, and then now as a researcher. And what I saw through this project was how these gifts were woven together so beautifully. And then the third thing was, she talked a lot about community in this project and the importance of community and support and relationships. And I saw Melody through this project, and just knowing her before this project, how she integrated her life with her community, with those involved in Cloud and Fire and young people, and was modeling in her leadership this integration of our lives and this mutuality. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on those 3 levels of integration that I observed through this project. I think that really stood out to me. So I just wanted to make that on the onset. So I'll let someone else go next, and I'll ask my questions, but just wanted to make that observation.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Kit.
Hi, Melody. That was beautiful. And the project was amazing and really captured the journey that you've been on with your school, but also with the thinking and the processes you've been forming for so many years, even before Cloud and Fire opened. I mean, so much of what you brought to Cloud and Fire was how much you were learning about these kids, their culture, what works. You began, as Mary was talking about, already understanding kind of the way in which we approach our communities holistically. So you brought so much of that into this school environment. I think what I want to comment on, besides the fact that this, I think, is a really, really important way that you've captured the work that you've been about for really a couple of decades. And that's that it's going to be a tool for others. And I don't know exactly how that will happen, but you have so many elements that are very directly transferable. One of the interactions that I had with you, Melody, quite a bit was the fact that 90-some% of poor Latino kids are in public school. So we have to figure out what to do with the public school. We have to figure out how to actually be sensible about the ways in which the things we've learned become gifts to systems that can change. Not all systems are unchangeable. Now, granted, there's something really wonderful about a very small setting, because you can do so much in a small setting you can't do in a large setting. And so much of your adaptability, your training, your cultural competency, your trauma-informed integration, and the layers of which you learned as a school to be trauma-informed. It's really actually quite incredible. We're a trauma-informed organization. We teach trauma-informed blah, blah, blah. We've been doing doctoral research on our campus, trauma-informed research, and it's really remarkable the layers of application that you did in your school. So all of that's true, but what you have here, others need. That's my larger point. The public school needs, other charter schools and their development need. I'm wondering if there's a part 2 after this dissertation that actually takes the work that you had to do that's in a format that Baki required, and then bring it into maybe modules, or I don't really know exactly how, but my affirmation to you is, and my encouragement to you is, what you've done here, people need. Educators need, people who are dreamers and visionaries need. And I've been thinking about that ever since I started reading your project. How do you get this out? Because it's really, really important work. And I think, as Mary said, the level of research now that you've done, you can really support your tried and tested methodology that all on your own you can you really were able to promote. But I think now with the research elements behind it, it's really going to provide some teeth. I think that the last thing I'd like to say, and that's has to do a little bit with colonization. And why not? Let's talk about colonization. Let's always talk about it. But what I think this project inspires and really is important for us to think about, and that's the future Latino leaders in our communities. And most of you know me well enough to know that's what I live and die for. And what happens in a school like Cloud and Fire is it reminds Latino young people that they are the future. Mm-hmm. And they can lead, and they have everything they need. And no matter how much colonization has disempowered them and told them otherwise, a space like Cloud and Fire began to deconstruct that for these young people. You are the future teachers. You're the future employers. You're the future parents. You are the future of your community. You're not a subculture. And here's my beautiful grandchild, Nani Day. And so anyway, those are my affirmations. Melody, you're an incredible thinker and an incredible servant of God, and this project needs to be out there.
Thank you.
Well, to kind of go on that, if I could ask a question, not to hog all the time up, but one of the questions that's been really stirring in me, Melody, is thinking about the trauma that's experienced on a personal level, on a communal level, like as a community, so the Latino community in your context, and then systemic, so like the injustices and the trauma that's experienced. How do you feel like we should navigate the distinguishing between those 3 different levels of the individual, personal, the communal, and then the systemic? How do we navigate that so that we can try to get ahead of the trauma that's being inflicted and create an environment that is moving them more towards, healing and wholeness? So how did you navigate distinguishing, I guess, those 3 layers of experience, if that makes sense?
I think so. Let me give the answer to the question I think you asked, and then you can tell me if it made sense. But, when we go into, and we didn't hear for time's sake, but I think most everyone in this space is familiar with all of these issues of honor and shame. And that's such an issue in Latino culture, right? And so what I observed is that the individual traumas are so deeply held in the far interior of a person and buried in so many layers of shame that there's almost nothing that can be done or nothing else that can be addressed until that comes up and is dealt with. So to me, the collective shame that you referred to is a secondary issue, because what you have, even though you are in a collectivist culture, you have all these isolated individuals standing next to one another. And one of the things that we saw over and over and over is, you know, the whole family values. Family is the most important in Latino culture. But so often the family was the place where the toxicity is perpetuated. You know, so freeing a person up individually, for us, that was our primary concern. There were very few times, except for for instance, in the example of the four sisters that all of you have read in that dissertation, the four sisters whose little sister was murdered by their mom, then they had a collective issue. But, you know, as far as more, you know, societal issues, we didn't really address those because we had our hands full with the individual heartaches and like just a complete shutdown of a person, you know, almost the Walking Dead of people that have to be restored. And then, like Kit was saying, they can rise into places of leadership where they can help address the collective issues. Did I answer the question you were asking?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll be quiet for a while now.
Well, since Nancy is staying quiet, I'll go ahead and stick my nose in here for just a moment. Because I know Nancy likes to get the last word in sometimes too. She's kind of like Melody. Yes, don't shake your head no, Nancy. I think I kind of occupy a unique position in all this because I walked this with Melody too. So she's not she's not the only one that has trouble on the tail end of this. But I agree with it seems a consensus that this word needs to get out and make it in some way actionable on the larger scale. I do know on the smaller scale, the staff, the teachers that were involved with Cloud and Fire have been changed through this, and largely are dissatisfied with the system as it stands because they've re-entered the workforce in outside of this ministry, and so in a small way there are changes that are already happening, and for the kids too. I mean, we don't know what the ripples are going to be from all these kids. I do know our one adopted boy, the last one we just recently got out of the house and on his own, is going to be a force to be reckoned with down the road, and he's intimate with this as well. So there are smaller changes that are taking place, and I think that speaks to what could take place on the larger stage if this is moved out and changed or started into the larger system. So I don't have any questions as such, just those comments. So with that, I'll turn that over to Nancy.
Oh, Nancy, we don't
Okay.
have any audio. There we go.
Okay. Now I do. I had it muted. I thought I was just the silent listening, praying, cheering partner here. So my request, Melody, is put your video back on so I can see your pretty face. But I just feel like it's been, there you are, such a privilege to have just shared from more from a distance than the rest of the people involved, and yet caring so much. And as I read through with you as you wrote, it's just been such a privilege to be, I'm still impressed and overwhelmed with the amount of research you did, but my heart was so touched just with how hard this must have been to conclude this.
Thank you.
Turn my microphone. Let me ask you a question, if I can, Melody. One question we have to answer on our evaluation form is how this project has actually changed you in some way. You know, in just terms of, you know, what are some of the highlights in terms of going through this project that have just really been, you know, kind of life-changing for you, even as a personal leader, etc.
Well, before I answer that, should I turn off the video? Are you getting jumbled up video? It's okay. All right.
You're doing good, fine, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think not just the research project, but also the whole doctoral process. You know, Kit and Mary's classes were so powerful, you know, in terms of digging into the community more, you know, and those are things that I neglected to do early on. It forced me to do that, and it opened my eyes to things that I didn't see before. So there was such a transformation in my thinking in terms of just understanding more issues across the board, and everything that I learned from the very first class I took, which was the Fresno Overture. I feel like I was sort of like Jeremiah. I was the weeping student. I just wept through this whole process. As my heart was really broken, maybe for the things that I didn't do, you know, along the way, for the things I didn't know to do. But in spite of all of that, in spite of all of the things that I felt were shortcomings, I think doing this research dissertation, it showed me that we were groping around like blind people, sometimes we felt like. And yet, God was directing us. And what we did, all of the things that we did were the right thing. Research, Pride, it's saying that my internet connection is unstable. Do I need to worry about that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. It is prioritizing your voice over your video.
Here. Connected. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just going to keep talking because I just lost my video screen, so I'll just keep talking. But it was so amazing of ourselves. We were doing the right things. We were doing what the research said we should have been doing, and we were doing it. So that's amazing. And what a testament to what God can do, that if you just show up and you just pray and you do the best you can, sometimes it's right. And the research validated that. And I think that in some ways, Dr. Payne, what this whole writing process and research process did for me was to sort of free me up from being in the tunnel that I was in. because when I started this, as you know, I had to completely ditch my first idea and start over because of the things that happened. And so I had to let go of what was and just walk into the unknown of what could be. And actually, that is what started Cloud and Fire. You know, there was such upheaval in my life. I was an opera singer, and then I was teaching in this inner city school, and I felt like the kids needed more. And it was such a step of faith, moment to moment, really, to start all of that and to see it build. And then, you know, to bookend it with this same kind of uncertainty and walking out into the unknown. But it freed me up to say, I did what I was supposed to do, and it's validated. And now there's uncertainty still, but I'm more prepared to do something, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like too many layers to really answer your question. I feel so different than when I started.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. Now, one of the issues that I've wrestled with students, and I've wrestled with myself too, is, you know, even in faculty, we get into the discussions, you know, the practitioner approach versus the quote academic approach. And, I mean, we talk a lot about that in my research class, you know, and it's really begun to strike me, though, I think that, you know, we really shouldn't be making a difference. You know, the academy, where the word academic comes from, is actually, you know, where those who are really wrestling with the issues of the day took place, right? And so, you know, we are just the whole process of research, right? You know, we use the term, I mean, we've used it for many years at BGU, exegeting your community. You know, and we take that from a biblical point of view. When you exegete a biblical passage, you're kind of digging into it, understanding, you know, the culture behind it, the background, the history, the semantics, all the various issues. And so when we talk about exegeting a community, we're kind of, you know, using that kind of an analogy. And I'm seeing more and more, you know, learning how to use research tools, you know, and trying to, you know, go into a situation to be a, you know, an active listener, learning how to try to distinguish between, you know, what is bias and what is not, what is, you know, we've got the big issue today, what is fake news? All those are issues that we need to, if we're going to be responsible practitioners, we are learning how to perceive, look at information, evaluate information, talk to people, understand people's perceptions, taking those perceptions and trying to bring them into some kind of a model that would be helpful. So, you know, it's good for me just to kind of hear, you know, what I go through, what you go through, and different ones I talk to in terms of, as we've learned more about, say, research. You know, my background is pastoral. I mean, that's where I've spent most of my life, was a pastor, okay? As I got into the educational community, I've had to learn and respect some of those academic traditions that now I hold dear and say, yeah, these are very important, even as we are functioning as practitioners in our various areas. So it's good to kind of hear when you say, you know, you've come through a process that is giving you tools, giving you perspective. You don't, like you say, you're not totally clear. Well, maybe, I don't know if you're clear yet at this point on how the Lord is leading for the future for you in Pride. And that'd be good, just for you maybe could speak to that. But I'll just kind of affirm the issue that, you know, you're learning about the importance of research in your day-to-day work. As we're trying to make change, we've got to have information. One of our students was kind of working, you know, down in the hotbed of Venezuela. And one of the issues he saw as he's trying to work with leaders is that a lot of those leaders had never even learned any tools on how to even begin to understand their community. One of the things he did was even helping some of the leaders learn how to even use the library in the local Catholic university that had not had a clue on even how to do that. You know, and that's been so exciting just to kind of see what Gustavo has been doing in terms of the work down there. But I guess just the issue of what research is, you know, and how we can use that research, you know, as practitioners in our various endeavors in the Lord's direction. Maybe just, I think it's been asked, but yeah, you're not, maybe just talk a little bit, you know, what maybe you think the future holds, and even what kinds of follow-up studies you think would even be helpful, or follow-up work to what you've done here might even be something that you would be very interested in doing.
Well, Nancy and Mary know this. But we are taking a kind of an unexpected turn in our lives. And we are at this moment packing up our house to sell, and we're going to be buying a home in Idaho. So we'll be your far neighbors, Dr.
Okay.
Penny. And in some ways, this doesn't make much sense. You know, there's not a lot of Latinos in Idaho. It looks like it's under 10%.
Mm-hmm.
We plan on dragging some with us. So we'll be changing the demographics there, because all of our family is Latino. So we're going to convince some of them to come with us. But what is really interesting, I've been doing some research into the Boise area, and there is a very strong refugee resettlement program there. Mm-hmm. And one of the nations that Boise has received is the Congolese. There's quite a number of Congolese refugees there. And Pride and I have been to the Congo twice. And that's just really strange. Like, what are the odds of all of this happening?
Yeah.
So as I have looked at this research, and it really was done through the lens of Latino cultures. But a year ago, I happened to be in Kansas City to hear, I just happened upon a church service that someone recommended to me, and Randy Frazee had just moved from Texas to Kansas City, and he was doing a citywide thing where churches were swapping pastors. And so he was preaching at the church that I visited, and they brought up some Congolese refugees. And I thought, oh, this is cool, you know, and they were talking about ministries that they were doing there. And it really hit me that all of these issues are the same, regardless of what culture you look at. And so many of the world's cultures have these same values that differ from the culture of the United States. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a handshake. There has to be, I'm all for helping people assimilate into a mainstream culture, but we can't do that if we don't understand where their culture is, and we can't, expect them to take away their identity, and we can't raise up the next generation if we expect them to cut off their values. It just won't happen. And I think some of the issues that we're dealing with politically have to do with people not understanding one another. There's not even clarity about what the differences are. There's just animosity. Right. So I think that as we settle in the Boise area, it could very well be that I will be involved in some kind of refugee resettlement program, which is extremely unexpected. This is sort of going out into the unknown, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the future.
All right. Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, because we live on an Indian reservation, Native American reservation here in our part of the Idaho, which is kind of a big population, of course. It's the whole Native American area. And I think, like you said, though, the work you did, say, within a Latino context, is just so transferable. when you like use the Lewis and the Hofstadter kinds of models to be able to just understand some of our differences, that's of course applicable no matter what kind of a culture you're working with. It's always been kind of exciting to me in BGU, having worked with BGU now for 20 years. But the atmosphere, the environment of BGU, as you know, is so cross-cultural, and we learn so much from each other. We all see ourselves as Christian, but then we see Christianity filtered through a lot of various cultural lenses. And that is, to me, that is just so exciting to be able to always be able to stand back and see how the Lord is revealing all of his. There's a scripture I'm kind of struggling with. It's kind of, I think it's in Peter, but it's the idea that the Lord manifests the many dimensions, is kind of what the Greek means, of himself as God. And I've always seen that in terms of all the cultural dimensions can reveal something more about the Lord.
Yeah.
As we learn, not, our cultures can often cause all kinds of conflict and turmoil. But to be, as Christians, it's always struck me, we need to be saying, okay, what can I learn about the Lord as I'm seeing the presence of God manifested through various cultural manifestations? And so, yeah, I just really pray that the Lord will, give you what you need as you're taking what you've learned in a Latino culture, and who knows, in the Congolese culture, that could be very, very exciting. So, yeah, thanks for sharing with that. Others want to share anything or talk? Or
I kind of want to come behind you, Bill, and kind of dream with you, Melody and Pride, because so I live in a state that has the largest numbers of First Nations tribes and the two largest Native American reservations, the Onaotam in the south and the Navajo in the north.
mm-hmm.
So I instantly went where you went, Bill, but I live in a Latino community, and that's why Melody came to me to be the second reader, because of the 40-year journey I've had in the Hispanic community here in Phoenix. So, but my heart has always seen, always, for 4 decades now, seen my community through a Native American lens. Why? Because Latinos, for the most part, have indigenous blood from from Latin America. And not only that, I live in Arizona, and it's just hard to pull those two apart. Mm-hmm. So what I see when I see you guys going to Idaho is, and I was quickly, looking up, the I guess 4 major tribes, right, in Idaho. Are there more, Bill?
I think that's about right. Yeah, we live on a Coeur d'Alene tribal.
Yeah. And so, Melody, before you fall in love with Congolese people, but I want you to love the Congolese, and that's where God's sending you, because and refugees, because as you know, also when you do work in the U.S. in the Latino communities, you're always dealing with asylum seekers and refugees and all of that, and we do that in our work as well. So I get the connection for a fact, but I just wonder how you're going to find where you belong and how all of this stuff's going to start transferring to its next place. And I don't know how many urban natives are in Boise, because reservations, have their own life, and then and city natives have their own life, right? And that's a whole complicated story. But all this disenfranchisement and all of the realities that you've come across with people who've been dispossessed in their own country and now have relocated into a country that sees them as invisible, which is what you've been dealing with in your community. Imagine that story played out for 500 year story right here in the U.S. as we look at our First Nations people. So anyway, I just wanted to, I just got so excited. I just,
And me too.
she's going to
I
Idaho.
grew up on the Yakima. Yeah, I grew up in the Yakima with the Yakima tribe.
Right.
Probably
Yeah.
a third of my school were members of the Yakima Nation, and
Yes.
so as you're talking, I'm saying yes. I see so many connections, not in recent research, but certainly in my memory bank with the kinds of things that you've been describing. And I think there's some aspects of what you did, Melody, in the San Fernando Valley that were, and Pride, that you certainly were a part of, that were so urban, and yet the principles and the disenfranchisement and the feeling left behind and the not being understood or appreciated, all those things I resonate with just from the way back when, and then what I have followed in the years since with the Yakima tribe.
Yeah, I would echo that too, Melody. Like I say, maybe the Congolese is what the Lord's calling you to, but you are being called to an area that is a very strong presence of First Nation peoples. And
Wow,
so I don't know what the Lord has in mind.
good input. Thank you all.
Before we moved here to Idaho, I was over in Missoula, Montana for several years and worked at the university there. And part of my work there was I worked with a Native American group on campus that actually helped train Social Security workers working with various Native Americans, Alaskan Native, Hawaiian Native, and Native Americans. But my task was to set up conference calls with, we call them CWIC. They were Community Worker Incentive Coordinators, and they worked with Native Americans who had disabilities, just trying to help them get through our system. But my job was setting up conferences and bringing in various people from a Native American culture, an Alaskan culture, a Hawaiian culture, who were within that culture themselves, but then they, on these conference calls, would spend time trying to sensitize these Social Security workers to cultural issues so that they would not be, causing offense when they were trying to go on to a reservation and trying to, become a helpful presence. But just the work you've done, and you've kind of had that experience of even sensitizing teachers to these cultural issues. I'm not even sure, again, how the Lord will use some of that experience that in your life to even helping sensitize people in teaching professions, counseling professions, political professions. I don't know, the sky is the limit. But there is such a need for that kind of work of sensitizing people who are put into situations of having to deal with other cultures and sometimes just not having a clue what's happening. So yeah, I'll really be praying that the Lord's going to just make that very clear to you in Pride as, say, you move into another geographical situation, what the Lord might have in store for you there. So again, just don't close any doors. Just keep your doors open.
That's great input. And, I don't think that has been on our radar. So I appreciate all that. And Nancy, I didn't know about your background that way. That's good. I turned off my video because I was having trouble receiving the audio, and I thought maybe that would help with bandwidth.
Yeah, this bandwidth issue is really a problem often. Well, if there's no other pressing issues, just for time's sake, we probably need to go ahead and move into an evaluation time for about 10 minutes. We'll try to be brief. Sometimes you get some of us together who have known each other for a while, we start reminiscing and talking. We'll try to get to our evaluation as quickly as possible. So what I need to do, I just need to be able to have Mary Glenn and Kit and myself kind of on the screen. So I'm going to put everybody else on hold. Your screen will say something like, no, you're on hold. Don't go away. Stay tuned. We will, bring you back in about 10 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
So hold on here. Let me find the right buttons to push. Okay, let's see. Melody, you're going on hold. And Pride, you're on hold. And then Nancy, you're going to be on hold here for a moment. All right. Looks like we're all here, huh?
Yep.
Good.
Bill, am I taking notes on this, or are you? Because I know sometimes you have before, so I'm not sure. Do you want?
I'm going to actually just put the form on the screen, and then we
Okay.
can just kind of work through it together.
Okay. So you're taking notes on it then?
I will take
Or-
some notes. Yeah, I'm going to just do them right here on screen.
Oh, I just
Yeah,
wasn't
I mean,
sure.
I've been taking notes, and I just, I always just open a Word doc and just start typing notes when I'm listening to a presentation.
Gotcha.
So let me bring this form back over onto the screen. Let's see what I need to share here. It's always so crazy when you're having this at this point, but we're trying to just put in our comments. I just put one of the great EGU projects.
Yeah.
I don't think we have pass with distinction anymore.
We don't. No, we took that out just because we've looked at a lot of other schools. Not most schools aren't using those kinds of distinctions. We said, if we think a student is really shining, it's going to get reflected in their,
The comments.
in the comments, and then, we are starting to possibly add to our degrees, honors and some of the various academic designations that we can put there. And so I think we actually did vote on that at an academic cabinet here within the last few months. Yeah. All right, let's bring Melody back in.
Okay.
Mary, you're the supervisor. I'm going to let you kind of make the announcements, kind of summarize what we've talked about here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let me get the right button pushed.
And for time's sake, my summary will be a little shorter than our conversations.
That
So
would be very good, yes. All right, we're back on.
can we see Melody?
Let me see if we can. Okay, there I am.
Great. Well, we had an in-depth discussion. We were really discussing some of the core principles and pieces of your dissertation. And just a couple of things I wanted to summarize. This will be in the final review report that will be recorded. But just to highlight a couple of pieces, Melody, we felt like you really embodied this project. This wasn't just a project that you wrote about. This comes out of who you are, what your passion is, the relationships that you have. And I think that not only impressed us or impacted us, but we could just see that thread throughout the whole dissertation. And we feel like you've really created something that is going to be a gift to many, many communities, and that there will be maybe part 2, part 3, part 4. There might be many different models that will come out of your model and implementations of this initial research that you've done. So we just wanted to say how much of a joy it was to be on a journey with you and to kind of see this process as you've done the research and as you've done your own reflection on your role in this community through Cloud and Fire and through the school district and through the broader LA community. So all that to say, I am very honored to say for the first time, congratulations, Dr. Melody Rossi, on your passing of your oral presentation and the dissertation process. So
Thank you.
congratulations, Doctor.
Thank you. And thank you all for just the amazing investment that you've made. I really appreciate all of you so much and your different gifts and talents and how you've challenged me. Thank you.
Well, I think I can say for Bill and Kit, we love you. And again, for us, academically, professionally, and personally, this was a great honor and gift for us to journey with you. So very proud of this moment. And as Kit said, you have a very gifted mind and approach and understanding, as well as heart. And it's that beautiful integration of those two strengths that you have that I think just really blessed us. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Love to all of you and appreciation beyond measure.
And now you can rest.
Thank you. And pack my house.
I was
Yeah,
going to say, now you can pack your house.
You don't have to worry about formatting. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
Citations, goodbye.
Right,
now.
right, yeah. I do want to tell you, Melody, congratulations. And we actually put on your in the comments on your form that this is one of the great BGU projects, and we just really appreciate the work you've done. I think I just echo what both Mary and Kit have said, that we so appreciate just in your own self, in your own life, the kind of an integration of your spiritual life, the passionate life that God's given you for people. In this case, right now, the Latino kids, and we know that passion is going to be transferable to others. And we really appreciate your diligence, just as you've been learning some of the academic disciplines and trying to apply those, to your practical situations. We just really have appreciated the integration that we've seen as you brought all those pieces together, and just encourage you to keep at it in terms of keeping that balance in your own life and in your own work as the Lord directs you in pride to whatever your future work is going to be. So again, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm so appreciative of just the whole BGU environment. It's, what a blessing in every way. And for all of you as role models.
Amen. All right.
You did it. Now you can rest.
Now you can go celebrate, you guys. Yeah.
See
Right.
you soon.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye now.
Bye.